Folks, I just saw a movie earlier this week. It's actually my first movie of 2025. It's called The Damned. And, folks, I was not expecting this to be my first movie kind of review on this channel to be this one. And, yeah, I just really want to talk about it. And, yeah, there's, like, very specific things I want to talk about of why this movie surprised me and got me excited, without going into spoilers. So I recommend coming back, saving this video, coming back, and then dropping your review in the comments. But yeah, I can't go any further without going into spoilers. So here we go.
We should not be here.
Help me! Help me!
Living always more dangerous than the dead.
So I should begin by saying I didn't even hear about this movie until literally last week when I was looking at the movies that were coming out in January. And I'm a pretty big horror fan, so once I saw the poster, I'm like, oh, I think this is a horror movie. The first thing that caught my eye was the red crosses, the graveyard look to it. And of course, it has all the marketing stuff on it. It's always funny with horror movies, there's always a review on these kind of posters where it'll be like, this is the scariest movie of the year or the scariest thing I've ever witnessed. And it's like, this is never fair for horror movies. But I digress. But yeah, so I saw it on Sunday night. And I guess gotta say, man, like this was a great choice to start the year off. It was really, really surprising. The first element, I guess you could say, that really caught my eye, pun intended, was that this film had that Robert Eggers, Yaron Blaschke, levels of cinematography, kind of like an A24 film even, cinematography. And I was reading about this after the fact that this movie uses a lot of natural light, to illuminate the scene, a lot like Robert Eggers does in his movies, like Nosferatu that just came out. So it's actually pretty cool to see Nosferatu as the last movie I just saw in theaters and then go to this. It was kind of like a treat for me. But yeah, it just looked really, really good. And honestly, at this point, for me, is if you're doing a horror movie, that's kind of like a period piece, especially if it's set in like the 18th or 19th century, I feel like you should be using natural lighting or candlelight, anything that that they would have had in that time period. It just helps make the movie look so much more realistic. It kind of grounds you in that era of the time that you're setting it in. So yeah, really love the cinematography. The next great thing I liked about this movie was our main character, Ava. Ava was played by Odessa Young. And yeah, this character was just refreshing for me. For a lot of, horror fans, there's the final girl, type character, which is in a lot of like slasher movies, especially. She isn't playing that type of character in this, and which I'm glad, that wasn't the case. It wouldn't have worked with the film in a tone sense. And they easily could have gone the route with this character, of, her having to maybe earn her keeps, so to speak, because this movie takes place in Iceland, at a fishery, basically, and they decided to make her the owner of the fishery. She's the sole owner of it. I think they mentioned at one point that her family used to own it, and I think they either left or died. I don't remember exactly, and I think her husband was the head fisherman, but they made it clear at the very least that she was the sole owner of this fishery. She hired all the men that are working here. They respect her authority. She's very authoritative in this movie from the very beginning, and I like that they established that they respect her, like that she knows her way around things, and even though she's not the one fishing, she still knows the knowledge of the area, the land, and what it takes to, do their job. She's very authoritative in that sense. And then, the biggest example of that too is, the main kind of plot device in this movie, to kind of start this story going, really, is the fact that, there's a ship sinking in their kind of, natural harbor, and, they're all discussing what they should do. And, they make a point saying they know she makes the final decision, and, she decides it for them, and they all don't question that. They're like, yep, okay, she made the decision, this is what we're doing. And you could argue maybe she made the wrong decision, because maybe if they went and saved those people, none of this would have happened. It was really just refreshing to have her, you follow her throughout the film, from her point of view, and, they didn't try to make it a thing where she had to earn her keeps. Like I said, she is very in control of her circumstances and of the situation. Well, I shouldn't say in control of the situation once, shit starts hitting the fan, but you know what I mean. It was just really, yeah, I just really liked that her character was different in that aspect, that she was kind of is the ringleader of this thing. And then we get to like the overall plot. I kind of talked about it loosely here, and then this kind of ties more into the setting, I guess, rather. But it's cold, it's bleak, it's in the middle of Iceland. It's very beautiful, but it's so bleak, and I don't know if it's because it's been also cold here in Colorado. It's early January, middle of January almost, 19 degrees, and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know if that added to it, but I did feel chilly watching this movie, and that's, for a horror movie, you usually get goosebumps, if it's a good horror movie, especially if it's an atmospheric one, the ones I like. But part of that is, establishing and being consistent with the atmosphere, I think, adds that element to your goosebumps, right? Where it's like, you're also scared, you're getting goosebumps because of that, but feels cold, so it's like double goosebumps. But yeah, like going back to the setting, it's so bleak and cold, right? But there's like an element to it, and it's really hard for me to describe or pinpoint how, but the way like the movie looks, and like the framing, and this goes a little bit into the cinematography again, it's almost visually how I feel like a sailor would describe a scary story, or like a spooky tale. And I don't mean like a modern day sailor, but like a sailor from that era, the 19th century, kind of describing the scenes. I feel like that's what it looked like, and it's really hard for me to describe other than that. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, just the setting was really, really good, and just, it was, like I said, just very chilly. And this actually goes in my next point that I wanted to cover, which is the Draugrs, and just the overall supernatural elements, that are showed to us and also told to us, like the different superstitions as well that are told to us about, like, it's basically an omen. The whole movie starts with an omen of like, hey, you didn't save those sailors who are sinking, but also just like, hey, we got to make sure their limbs are all tied before they go in the coffin, that kind of superstition. And, kind of like even like an Edgar Allan Poe poem or whatever, where like it tells us what, is maybe going to happen, or kind of, using that as a way to, foreshadow what's going to happen next. It's still just really cool. I really like that stuff. I like that type of storytelling where it's like, hey, yeah, they're mentioning all this because it's gonna happen, but it's cool, it's fine. I don't mind that level of foreshadowing, or even some people would say it's predictability. But yeah, I liked that a lot. And the Draugrs themselves, I've always liked, I guess, that as a thing. I know it's typically from like Norse mythology, if I'm not mistaken. You might have heard of it maybe in like a role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons. If you've played God of War, they're some of the base enemies you fight. But yeah, Draugrs, to me, going into this movie, they've always been described as kind of an undead soldier or Norseman of some sort, warrior rather. And yeah, I just really like that. That's really cool, right? But what was different, like what I wasn't expecting when they kind of were first hinting at them, was that it was going to be more of a psychological, twist on it. And I thought throughout this movie it was going to be there really was a Draugr of some sort that was walking around outside, but he has, the sort of power to manipulate people's psyche, you know what I mean? And then he kind of finishes them off, or maybe he appears when their psyche is twisted enough. That's kind of how I was interpreting it. And I thought that was really cool and made it almost scarier, right? Where it's like, okay, he can kind of manifest wherever. But he also still was physical. And in a way, that's maybe one of my critiques of this film, is I actually wanted the Draugr to be more physically there. Like, they physically showed him, but like we don't see him interact with any of the characters directly. And I'm okay at not being every single time, they show. I don't want it to be like a slasher where every time they show him killing somebody. I like that sometimes, they found someone already killed or whatnot, and you can kind of imagine what happened. But, towards the later half of the movie, I wanted, one of the characters, maybe Ava, to, physically fight the character, or maybe almost get captured by the Draugr. I wanted more of that. So that was my one thing, where it's like, I don't mind the psychological elements of it, but I guess I wanted the Draugr to be there more physically, interacting with the characters. There was one really cool scene I wanted to point out with the Draugr, which is towards the later end of the movie when they're up in the mountains, and Ava gets, cut off from the rest of the party. She's basically down the side of a cliff, and she finds, a couple, I think one body or maybe a couple bodies, but at one point she like looks over, and it's like the way they like show it, it almost looks like a boulder, but then you're like, no, is that a corpse? Is that the Draugr kind of like hunched over? You couldn't really tell, but then regardless, that they had that humanoid shape, and then you have the raven sitting like on the shoulder, or if it is a rock, on the rock, hovering there, cawing, and then eventually it flies away, and then we get closer and we see it is actually a corpse. But yeah, I liked how in that scene, since we've established that there's some psychological elements to it, or abilities to the Draugr, I liked the idea that it's playing on Ava's imagination, but also the audience's imagination. That's how you continue to bring in the audience into the movie, into the setting, right? And yeah, I just wanted to point out that scene because that was probably one of my favorite scenes in this movie. So those are all the big things I want to talk about, but now we have to get to my main real issue with this film. And if you've seen this, and this is probably going to be your first criticism as well, I'd imagine. But yeah, let's talk about it, which is the ending of this film, man. Like, it fell so flat. It just fell so flat at the end. Like, and this movie was an hour and 29 minutes, I believe. And, I feel like that's a sweet spot, especially for horror movies. Sometimes horror movies be too long. Granted, there's always an exception to the rule. It's not even really a rule. I'm not that black and white on it. But, an hour and a half is a pretty, just generally speaking, I guess, a good length for a movie. Nowadays, I feel like an hour and a half is like right in the sweet spot, and, it's right there. But I think this movie needed an extra like 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes to help pace ourselves into the ending, because the pacing was great throughout the film. Then all of a sudden we hit the ending and it just felt very rushed. Like, all of a sudden she encounters the Draugr in the room with her, and she's hiding under the table, and eventually, she grabs the gun that her maybe new boyfriend showed her how to use, and she, kills him, or at least wounds the Draugr, and then she sets it on fire and the whole house on fire, and then she leaves, and she runs into the two last of her folks there, and she's like, I killed it, I burned it, and then she realizes, oh, it was actually one of the sailors all along, that she was kind of imagining it. She was letting maybe her paranoia and the superstitions all get to her head, and, she basically created this Draugr in her head, and it really wasn't a Draugr at all. And I'm like, but and I don't mind that as an ending. It just felt very rushed and quick, and it kind of opens the door to question the other instances where people were going crazy and seeing things. I thought, it kind of established that there was supernatural things happening, but was everyone just going crazy, stir crazy? I mean, cabin fever is a thing, but it just kind of just didn't work for me at the end there. Like, I like the attempt at it. I really do. And I like that, she didn't become a final girl again, like I said at the top, in the sense of, she was the last one left, and it was her versus the Draugr or anything like that. Like, I'm okay with other people being alive and whatnot. But yeah, like, it just fell flat, and it felt very rushed, and just winds up not being satisfying. And yeah, just kind of was like, man, this movie was like really good. Like, throughout, the pacing was good. It was spooky. It was scary. It was eerie. A lot of great moments in this movie. And I don't have that many critiques of this movie, but this was the biggest one, and it just really hurt this film, where I was like, you get to the ending and you're like, wait, what? Like, oh, sure, I guess, okay. Like, you try to start rationalizing of like, maybe it wasn't that bad. But yeah, this movie ended in just a very dissatisfying way. Like, and yeah, let me know if you agree with that or not. It just felt very rushed. In a movie that was very well paced, and is a slow burner, but is very well paced, I think. And yeah, it just fell so flat. And to get closer to wrapping up here, I saw this was directed by Thordor Paulson, who also co-jointly wrote it as well with Jamie Hannigan. And I've never seen any of Paulson's previous work. I think they've done some TV series and a bunch of shorts, but this was their first full-length movie. And, to go back to all the positives that I said, I feel like Paulson, is doing all the right things for a horror movie. And despite the ending, I want to see more. I'm very curious to see, what Paulson does next, and I think this is a very good first movie. And it, like I said, despite the ending, like, I think there is potential here, and yeah, I just want more. So that's honestly the main reason I even decided to do this video in the first place, because I was like, man, there's like a lot of potential here. And, it kind of sucked, the ending, but like, there's a lot of potential here, and it makes me excited to see what Paulson will do next. And I hope maybe people who watched this movie and maybe stumbled into this review feel the same way. And, if they make another horror movie especially, to, give them another shot. And, I really just want to see what they do next, because all the potential's there. But yeah, in conclusion, I think I would give this movie probably a 3.5 stars, or if I'm matching the system we do on this channel here, for our video game movie reviews, and give it like a tier ranking, from S to F. I would give this probably a lower B tier, maybe a high C. But if that ending was better, and we have more of Draugr, I guess, combat, or Draugr in a physical sense, shown, I think this movie would go up probably to a 4 for me, maybe a 4.5. And then to go back to the tier system, it'd probably be closer to an A tier movie for me. So yeah, the final verdict for this movie, The Damned, it is a B tier on a general movie scale for me. And then the 3.5 star, if you're going on Letterboxd or whatever, 3.5 stars out of 5. It has a lot of good and great elements, in terms of its setting, characters, and its almost tale-like story, right? I enjoyed the overall pacing of this movie, but unfortunately that ending, really, like, I didn't have many negatives with this film, but it was a pretty big negative. That ending, like I said, felt very rushed and unsure of itself, almost. So that's kind of why I have it at a lower B probably, or even a C. But 3.5 stars, B tier. I'll just lock it in as that. But like I mentioned before, despite the negatives and the ending and all those things, like I mentioned before, I'm really looking forward to see what Paulson does next. I hope it's another horror movie. Hope it's another full-length horror movie. And if he does another, like, 1800s, 1900s, setting, I think that'd be really cool. When we have Robert Eggers in the horror, it'd be cool to have another director and writer who's kind of there too, making similar in terms of setting horror movies. Because I'm a sucker for period pieces and in terms of horror movies, and so I really hope he continues to make full-length movies, especially horror ones. Thanks for watching, folks. This is my first time trying out this kind of quick movie review video on this channel and in general. I hope you liked it, and if you did like it, drop a like, comment, subscribe, all those things. But let me know what you thought about this movie. I'm really curious to see if I'm similar in terms of, like, hey, I'm kind of hyped about this movie despite some issues I had with the ending and some other little things. I'm really curious what other people's thoughts are on this film, because there's gonna be a lot of horror movies, I think, coming out in 2025, like Frankenstein and all that. But sometimes these smaller budget films sneak in there in people's kind of radars, and people are like, hey, this is really good. And this movie almost had that for me, but there's still a lot here that I did like, and so I'm really curious what other people's thoughts are. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Appreciate it.